The sound hit Natasha before the sight did her mother's broken cry cutting through the winter air, followed by something worse. Laughter. Cold, sharp, deliberate laughter that made her blood freeze. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Tribeca penthouse, Natasha saw them both. Her mother Delphine, slumped in her wheelchair on the freezing balcony, tears streaming down her face. And Marcus, her husband, her partner, the man she'd trusted with everything standing just inside the warm apartment, champagne glass raised, laughing with a cruelty she'd never seen before. It was Christmas morning. She'd been gone 3 months. And in that moment, watching her paralyzed mother shivering in the December cold while strangers partied in her home, Natasha understood that everything she'd believed about her marriage had been a lie. Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Cael Stories. Before we dive into today's story, I want to thank each of you for being part of this community. Your comments, your shares, your stories, they matter. If this one resonates with you, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button. Now, let's talk about what happens when the person you trust most becomes the person who destroys you most completely. Have you ever discovered that your entire life was built on someone else's lies? That the love you believed in was just a performance, and you were the only one who didn't know it was a show? This is the story of a woman who gave everything to save the man she loved, and came home to find he'd been systematically destroying the person she loved most. But it's also the story of what happened when she stopped being his victim and became his reckoning. Let's begin where it all started to unravel. 6 years earlier, Natasha Winters had everything figured out. At 32, she'd built her own commercial real estate firm from the ground up, inherited a modest fortune from her grandmother, and created a life that was successful, independent, and entirely hers. She didn't need anyone, which was probably why Marcus Ashford noticed her. They met at a charity gala in Manhattan. Natasha was there to network. Marcus was there to hunt, though she didn't know that then. He was everything a romance novel promised. Tall, devastatingly handsome, with silver-streaked hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. His family owned Ashford Technologies, a company that had been featured in Fortune 500 lists for decades. "You're the only woman in this room, not trying to impress anyone," he'd said, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "That's either confidence or contempt. I'm hoping it's the first." She'd laughed, charmed despite herself. "Maybe it's both." "Even better," he'd replied, and his smile had seemed so genuine. Their first kiss happened 3 weeks later, on the High Line under a canopy of city lights. Marcus had taken her hand, pulled her close, and whispered, "I've been waiting my whole life to find someone who doesn't need me, someone I get to choose to need instead." It had felt like poetry, like destiny. The romance that followed was intoxicating. Marcus sent her flowers every Friday, not roses, but vintage books with pressed flowers inside, because he'd learned she loved reading. He'd show up at her office with takeout from her favorite Thai place when she worked late. He'd hold her face in his hands and tell her she was the most remarkable woman he'd ever met. "I want forever with you," he'd said one night in her apartment, tangled in her sheets, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her skin. "I want to build an empire together. Your brilliance, my resources, we could change the world." She'd believed him. God, she'd believed every word. Their wedding was featured in Town & Country magazine. 2 powerful families joining forces, creating a dynasty. Marcus had cried during his vows. Actually cried. "You've made me want to be the man you think I am," he'd said, his voice breaking. Her mother Delphine had been radiant that day, dancing with Marcus's father, laughing with the joy only a mother feels when she sees her daughter truly happy. "He loves you so much, ma chérie," Delphine had whispered. "I can see it in everything he does." The first 18 months of marriage were perfect. They traveled together, built business connections, hosted dinner parties where they finished each other's sentences. Marcus would pull her into his lap during breakfast and kiss her neck while she read the morning news. He'd leave notes in her briefcase. "Destroy them in that meeting today. I'll be here to celebrate with you tonight." Then, 18 months ago, Delphine had a stroke. Natasha had been in Chicago, closing a deal when she got the call. She'd flown back immediately, spent 3 days at her mother's bedside, watching the woman who'd raised her alone struggle to speak, to move, to be herself. The doctor said Delphine would need full-time care, possibly for the rest of her life. "We'll take care of her together," Marcus had said, holding Natasha while she cried. "Your mother is my mother now. I promise you, she'll have everything she needs." When Natasha suggested hiring professional care, Marcus had insisted they could do better. "She raised you by herself after your father died. She deserves family care, not strangers. I'll make sure she's comfortable while you handle the business. That's what marriage is. We carry each other's burdens." It had seemed so loving, so selfless. Before we continue, I want to pause and ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you ignored the small warning signs? The moments that didn't quite add up? Drop a comment below about how you learned to trust your instincts. Now, let's see how Natasha's trust was about to be shattered in the worst possible way. 3 months ago, Marcus had come to Natasha with devastating news. Ashford Technologies was facing bankruptcy, a series of bad investments, a lawsuit from a former partner, debts that had been hidden from the board. They were looking at losing everything, his family legacy, their combined wealth, their entire future. I need 3 months to restructure, he'd said, his face buried in his hands. But we need capital, significant capital. Natasha had known immediately what he meant. Her grandmother's villa in Monaco, the sprawling Mediterranean estate she'd inherited 2 years ago. She'd been planning to keep it, maybe retire there someday. But watching her husband, the man she loved, break down about losing his family's legacy, sell it, she'd said without hesitation. Whatever it takes to save us. Marcus had pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. I don't deserve you. I swear to God, Natasha, I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. The villa was worth $42 million, enough to save Ashford Technologies and secure their future. But the sale wasn't simple. Monaco real estate laws were Byzantine, the potential buyers were entitled billionaires who thought they could lowball her, and the local officials seemed to expect bribes at every turn. Natasha had moved to Monaco temporarily to handle it herself. She couldn't risk losing millions to incompetent brokers or corrupt officials. This was their salvation, she had to get it right. Every night, she video called Marcus. He'd show her photos of Delphine, her mother smiling in the garden, enjoying meals, sitting by the fireplace with a blanket. She's doing great, Marcus would assure her. She misses you, but she understands you're doing this for all of us. Tell her I love her, Natasha would say, her heart aching. Tell her I'll be home soon. She knows, baby. She knows. Marcus would send her loving messages throughout the day. Photos of sunsets with captions like, watching this and thinking of our honeymoon. Voice messages saying, I miss you so much it physically hurts. Come home soon. Videos of himself in their bedroom, late at night, saying, the bed feels empty without you. I can't sleep when you're not here. During their honeymoon in Santorini, they'd made love on a balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea, the sunset painting everything gold. This is what forever looks like, Marcus had whispered against her skin. You and me, building something beautiful. She remembered that moment during the grueling Monaco negotiations. When a Saudi buyer tried to offer $30 million for a $42 million property, she thought about Marcus's tears and held firm. When the French officials delayed permits for the third time, clearly waiting for a bribe, she found legal workarounds instead of paying them off. Every dollar mattered. This wasn't just money, it was their future, their family, everything they'd built together. The 3 months felt like 3 years. She worked 16-hour days, fought through language barriers and cultural differences, navigated corruption and entitlement. But she did it. She closed the sale at $42 million, every penny secured. She called Marcus immediately. I did it. We're saved. His voice had cracked with emotion. You're incredible. You're the most incredible woman alive. Come home. Please come home. She'd booked a flight that night, planning to surprise him. It was 3 days before Christmas. Perfect timing to celebrate together, to start rebuilding their life now that the crisis was over. On the flight home, Natasha had felt nothing but triumph. She'd saved them. She'd saved his company, their marriage, their future, and now they could finally breathe. She'd texted her assistant to keep her arrival quiet. She wanted to walk through their door and see the relief on Marcus's face, wanted to surprise him with the news in person, wanted to hold her mother and reassure her that the sacrifice had been worth it. The car ride from JFK to their Tribeca penthouse took forever. Natasha watched the city lights blur past, mentally planning their Christmas. She'd get her mother's favorite pastries from the French bakery. They'd have a quiet celebration together, just the three of them. Maybe she and Marcus would open wine by the fireplace like they used to, his arms around her, finally able to relax. She still believed in him, still believed in them. She had no idea that the man she'd spent 3 months saving had spent those same 3 months systematically destroying the person she loved most. The elevator doors opened to the sound of music blasting from their penthouse. Loud, bass-heavy club music that made the walls vibrate. Natasha frowned, dragging her suitcase down the hallway. Maybe Marcus had invited a few friends over to celebrate, though he knew she'd be exhausted from travel. She reached their door and tried her key. It didn't work. Confused, she tried again. Nothing. The lock had been changed. Through the door, she could hear laughter, glasses clinking, dozens of voices. She knocked, but nobody answered. The music was too loud. Natasha walked to the large windows that looked into their living room from the exterior hallway, and her blood went cold. Their home was packed with strangers. At least 50 people she'd never seen before. Drinking expensive champagne, wearing designer clothes. The furniture had been rearranged. Her grandmother's antique piano, the one piece she'd kept from the Monaco villa, was gone, replaced by a DJ booth with flashing lights. The Christmas tree was wrong too. She'd carefully collected ornaments over the years, sentimental pieces from her childhood, from her mother's past, from meaningful moments. They were all gone. In their place were gaudy, expensive decorations that looked like they'd been bought that afternoon to impress people. Marcus stood in the center of it all, wearing a suit she'd never seen before, probably $5,000 at least. He had his arms around two women Natasha didn't recognize, laughing at something on someone's phone. And then she saw the balcony. Through the glass doors, in the 20-degree December cold, sat her mother. Delphine was slumped in her wheelchair, wearing only a thin nightgown, her face contorted with cold and fear. She was crying, her mouth moving in words Natasha couldn't hear. Marcus's sister Vivienne walked past the balcony door, glanced at Delphine, and kept walking. She was laughing with a group of people near the champagne tower. Marcus's brother Julian was filming everything on his phone, panning across the party like he was documenting some social media victory. Natasha pounded on the window, screaming. Nobody heard her over the music. She watched Marcus throw his head back and laugh at something, his arms still around those women, while 15 feet away her mother froze in the December night. The laugh. That cold, cruel laugh that sounded nothing like the man she'd married. It was the sound of someone enjoying their power, their control, their complete lack of consequences. Natasha pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called Marcus. Through the window, she watched him pull his phone from his pocket, glance at the screen, and decline the call. Then he turned to the crowd and said something that made them all laugh harder. She called 911. My mother is disabled and locked on a balcony in 20-degree weather. The people inside won't let her in. She gave the address, her voice mechanical with shock. Then she called her attorney, Margot Chen, who she'd worked with for years. I need you to meet me at the Four Seasons in 1 hour. And I need the name of the best locksmith in Manhattan, who works on Christmas Eve. By the time the police arrived, Natasha had already gotten the building's doorman to open the penthouse door with his master key. She pushed through the crowd of drunk strangers, ignoring their protests, and went straight to the balcony. Delphine was trembling violently, her lips blue, her nightgown soaked where she'd clearly lost control of her bladder hours ago. When she saw Natasha, her face crumpled completely. I'm sorry, Delphine managed through chattering teeth and stroke-affected speech. I'm sorry I became such a burden. Those words broke something fundamental in Natasha's chest. She wrapped her coat around her mother, unlocked the wheelchair brake, and turned back toward the living room. The music had stopped. Everyone was staring. Marcus stood near the fireplace, his face a mask of annoyance. Not concern, not guilt, just irritation that she'd interrupted his party. You're back early, he said flatly. I was going to surprise you tomorrow. Natasha stared at this stranger wearing her husband's face. Where is her nurse? Where is her medication? We gave the nurse the holidays off, Vivian said, examining her manicure. Your mother is fine. She just wanted some fresh air. In December, in a nightgown. Unable to call for help, Natasha's voice was deadly quiet. Don't be so dramatic, Marcus said, and several people laughed. Actually laughed. You've been gone for 3 months chasing money in Monaco. You don't get to come back and act like you care about family now. The police arrived then, along with paramedics. While the medics checked Delphine's vitals and wrapped her in thermal blankets, officers took statements. The party guests started leaving quickly, suddenly aware this wasn't the fun celebrity gathering they'd thought it was. What the hell is this? Marcus demanded, his mask slipping to show rage underneath. You called the cops on your own husband? I called them about the woman freezing on a balcony while you threw a party, Natasha said. The woman you promised to care for. The woman who clearly hasn't been bathed or changed in hours, maybe days. That's a lie, Marcus snapped. We took excellent care of her. She has stage 3 bed sores. One of the paramedics interrupted quietly. Those don't develop in a few hours, sir. We need to take her to the hospital. Natasha looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw the truth she'd been blind to. The contempt in his eyes wasn't new, he'd just hidden it better before. Or maybe she'd just been too in love to see it. I'll meet them at the hospital, she told the officers. I'm taking my mother to the Four Seasons tonight. I'll have someone collect her things tomorrow. This is my house, Marcus said, stepping forward. You don't get to just... Your house? Natasha's laugh was bitter. Check the deed, Marcus. Check whose name is on everything in this apartment. Then check yourself into wherever you plan to sleep tonight, because it won't be here. She left with her mother, with the paramedics, with the last shreds of the life she'd believed in 3 hours ago. Behind her, she heard Marcus shouting about his rights, his property, his marriage. But she didn't look back. I need to pause here and ask you something important. When you see someone you love being abused, what do? When you realize you've been protecting the abuser, how do you make it right? Let me know in the comments. Because Natasha's about to learn the full truth of what happened during those 3 months, and it's so much worse than she imagined. The four-season suite was quiet, warm, safe, everything the penthouse hadn't been. Natasha helped her mother into the bathroom, her hands shaking as she saw the full extent of the neglect. Delphine's nightgown was stiff with dried urine and feces. Her skin was paper-thin and bruised in dozens of places. The bed sores the paramedic had mentioned were angry, infected wounds on her hips and lower back. How long? Natasha asked softly, helping her mother into the shower, supporting her weight. How long has it been like this? Week. After you left, Delphine managed, tears mixing with the warm water. Maybe 2 weeks, 2.5 months. Her mother had endured 2.5 months of this, while Natasha fought to save Marcus's company. While she gently washed her mother's hair, Delphine spoke in halting words, her stroke-affected speech making the truth even more heartbreaking. The nurse, gone. Second day. Marcus said, too expensive. Said you wanted money saved. I never said that. I would never. I know now. Delphine's good hand gripped Natasha's wrist. He lied. About everything. After the shower, after getting Delphine into clean clothes and calling a private doctor for a full examination, Natasha sat beside her mother's bed and asked the question she was terrified to hear answered. What else did he do? Delphine reached for her wheelchair bag, the small purse that hung from the chair's handle. Her trembling fingers pulled out a small digital voice recorder. Started. Recording. 2 weeks in. Thought. If something happened. To me. She couldn't finish. Natasha's blood went cold. You thought he might kill you. Her mother's silence was answer enough. With shaking hands, Natasha pressed play on the first recording. Her mother's voice, weak and pleading. Please, I've been sitting in this for hours. Please just help me change. Vivian's voice, annoyed. Jesus Christ again? You just went. I'm not doing this 5 times a day. It's not. I can't control. Delphine's humiliation was audible. Whatever. Marcus will deal with it when he gets home. I'm not a goddamn nurse. Footsteps walking away. Then, faintly, her mother crying. Natasha skipped forward. Another recording, different day. Julian's voice laughing. Say it again. Say I need help again. The stroke voice is hilarious. Please, I need help. Oh my God, it's like a drunk robot. Hold on. I'm recording this for TikTok. No. Please don't. Relax, old lady. Everyone thinks disabled humor is hilarious now. You might go viral. Natasha's hands clenched into fists. She skipped forward again. This recording was in the kitchen. She could hear the sounds of gourmet cooking, wine being poured, laughter. Delphine's voice. Could I have some, please? Haven't eaten since yesterday. Marcus's voice, casual. There's leftovers in the fridge from 2 days ago. You can have that. It's spoiled, I think. It made me sick. Then don't eat it. His voice was so cold, so unconcerned. We can't afford to feed you like a queen right now, Delphine. Your daughter's off spending money in Monaco while we're here scraping by. But you said she was sending money for my care. A pause. Then Marcus, closer to the recorder. I said she was working on it. There's a difference. Now stop whining. Nobody wants to hear it during dinner. More recordings. Hours of them. Days of them. A comprehensive documentation of systematic abuse. Delphine being left in soiled clothes for entire days. Being fed expired food while they ordered Uber Eats from expensive restaurants. Being locked in her room during parties so guests wouldn't see her. Vivian discussing accidents that could solve their problem. A fall down the stairs, medication errors. Old people die in the winter all the time. And then, the final recording. Dated 4 days ago, Christmas Eve. Marcus's voice, drunk and unguarded, talking to someone on the phone. Just a few more days, Dad. The Monaco money clears on the 26th. We filed divorce papers on the 27th. And by New Year's, we're liquidating everything. She'll get whatever the prenup says, which is basically nothing, since David wrote it for us, and we split the rest 3 ways. A pause while the other person talked. The old lady? State facility? Not my problem anymore. Jesus, do you know what a relief it'll be? I've spent 6 years training Natasha to believe she's worthless without me. By the time this is over, she'll think the divorce is her fault. More conversation. Of course I'll cry in court. I'll tell them she abandoned her dying mother to chase money, that she prioritized business over family. The judges eat that shit up. And with David as her lawyer. He laughed. She signed papers she never actually read. The prenup she thinks protects her inheritance, it does the exact opposite. She signed over power of attorney, joint assets, everything. David made sure of it. Another pause. Because she trusts me, Dad. That's what I've spent 6 years building, complete trust. She thinks I'm the victim here, that I need saving. She just sold a $42 million property to save me. She doesn't know Ashford. Technology's shut down 3 years ago. She doesn't know I've been living entirely off her money this whole time. The longest pause. Then Marcus's final words, slurred but clear. I learned from the best, didn't I? You did this 3 times. I watched you destroy Mom, then Sandra, then Claire, all the same way. Make them think they're broken, that they're lucky to have you, that leaving would be their failure. Then take everything and disappear before they realize what happened. The recording ended. Natasha sat in silence. The recorder still playing dead air, while her entire world reconstructed itself around this new, horrifying reality. 6 years. Their entire relationship had been a con. Every loving word, every tender moment, every promise, all of it had been strategic, training her to believe she was worthless. Building trust so he could destroy her more completely. She'd sold her grandmother's villa to save a company that didn't exist. She'd left her mother in the care of a man who'd been systematically abusing her. She'd trusted the lawyer who'd helped Marcus steal everything. The doctor arrived then, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and efficient hands. She examined Delphine thoroughly while Natasha stood by the window, staring out at the city lights without really seeing them. Severe malnutrition, the doctor reported quietly. Dehydration requiring IV fluids. The bed sores are infected and will need daily wound care. Signs of emotional trauma. Evidence of extended neglect. She paused. This is a criminal case, Miss Winters. Elder abuse, possibly attempted manslaughter. You need to report this. I will, Natasha said softly, then turning to face the doctor. But first, I need to make sure he can never do this to anyone else ever again. After the doctor left, after setting up the IV for Delphine and leaving medication and care instructions, Natasha sat beside her mother's bed and held her good hand. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I left you with him. I'm so sorry I didn't see. You loved him, Delphine said simply. Love makes us blind. Sometimes. I should have protected you. Her mother squeezed her hand with surprising strength. Now, you do. Now, you fight. Natasha looked at her mother, this woman who'd raised her alone after her father died, who'd worked 3 jobs to send her to college, who'd taught her that strength wasn't about never falling down, but about always getting back up. And she made a promise. He's going to regret that he didn't just rob us and disappear, Natasha said quietly. He's going to regret that he stuck around to gloat. Because I'm about to show him what happens when you underestimate a woman you've spent 6 years teaching to be ruthless. Her mother smiled. Just a little. That's my girl. Natasha pulled out her phone and started making calls. It was 2 a.m. on Christmas, but what she was planning couldn't wait, because Marcus Ashford had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed that breaking her would keep her down. He'd forgotten that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, and she was about to burn his entire world to the ground. The first call was to Margot Chen, who answered on the second ring, despite the hour. Tell me you recorded everything, Margot said without preamble. Better. My mother recorded everything. Natasha's voice was steady now, cold with purpose. I'm sending you files. Audio documentation of systematic elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and what sounds like a pattern of behavior spanning multiple marriages. Jesus Christ. Papers rustled in the background. I'm pulling the case files now. What do you need from me? Everything. Emergency protective orders, asset freezes, criminal complaints. And I need to know that prenup I signed. Marcus said his lawyer friend David wrote it. How bad is it? A long pause. How bad do you think? Scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being I signed away my entire inheritance. Natasha. Margot's voice was gentle. When you asked me to review it 6 years ago, I told you it was problematic. You said Marcus's lawyer was a family friend and you trusted him. The memory hit like cold water. She'd been so in love, so certain that questioning the prenup would insult Marcus, would imply she didn't trust him. I chose him over you. You chose love over caution. It's human. Margot paused. But yes, the prenup is bad. In the event of divorce, it essentially treats your inherited wealth as marital assets subject to split. And there's a clause that if divorce is filed for abandonment, defined as absence from the marital home for more than 90 consecutive days, you forfeit spousal support and the joint assets default to him. I was gone 3 months. 92 days by my count. He was probably planning to file today. Natasha closed her eyes. The precision of it, the calculated cruelty. Can we fight it? Honey, we're going to destroy it. A prenup signed under false pretenses, with fraudulent representation, where your lawyer was actually working for the opposing party? That's voidable 6 ways to Sunday. Plus, with the audio evidence of his intent to defraud. Margot's voice turned sharp with anticipation. He just handed us a RICO case. The second call was to Simone Baptiste, Natasha's best friend from business school who'd become a specialist in elder care law. I need a prosecution strategy, Natasha said without greeting. Elder abuse, criminal neglect, conspiracy, and I need to make sure he can never do this again. Forward me everything. I'll have a brief ready by morning. Simone paused. Natasha, are you okay? No, but I will be. After I finish destroying him. That's my girl. Send the files. The third call was to Dr. Patricia Harrison, CEO of the hospital foundation where Natasha served on the board. I need medical experts willing to testify about elder abuse in a criminal case, Natasha said. And I need resources for my mother's recovery that aren't connected to anything Marcus might have access to. Consider it done. And Natasha, I'm so sorry this happened. Your mother is a remarkable woman. We'll make sure she gets the best care possible. The fourth call was the one Natasha had been dreading. She dialed a number she'd ignored for 6 years. A number that had tried to reach her dozens of times in the month before her wedding. Hello? The voice was elderly, cautious. Phyllis Ashford? Natasha asked. This is Natasha Winters, Marcus's wife. I should have taken your calls 6 years ago. A long-waited silence. Then, he hurt you. He hurt my mother. Systematically, deliberately, while I was trying to save his fake company with my real money. His father's playbook, word for word. Phyllis Ashford, Marcus's estranged aunt, had been cut out of the family 30 years ago for causing problems, which Natasha now understood meant she'd tried to warn Marcus's father's victims. I have documentation going back 4 decades. 3 wives, a dozen girlfriends, all the same pattern. Build trust, isolate them, take everything, disappear. I tried to warn you before the wedding. I know. I'm sorry I didn't listen. Water under the bridge, dear. The question is, are you ready to fight? I'm ready to bury him. Good. Because I've been waiting 30 years for someone with the resources and rage to actually hold these men accountable. Come see me tomorrow. I'll give you everything I have. By dawn, Natasha had assembled a team. Margot Chen handling the legal warfare, Simone Baptiste building the criminal case, Dr. Harrison providing medical documentation, Phyllis Ashford supplying the generational context, and a financial forensics specialist named Robert Kim who came highly recommended for untangling complex fraud. They met at Margot's office on Christmas morning, all of them sacrificing the holiday because they believed in the fight. Robert Kim was the one who delivered the knockout revelation. Ashford Technologies ceased operations 37 months ago, he said, pulling up documents on his laptop. The company's been a shell for 3 years. No employees, no revenue, no operations. Marcus shut it down and never told anyone, including the board. He's been living entirely off your money since then. The bankruptcy story? Natasha asked. Complete fiction. There was no lawsuit, no bad investments. He needed a reason to get you to sell the Monaco property, so he created a crisis. Robert pulled up more documents, and here's where it gets interesting. I traced your accounts, every joint account, every investment he had access to. Over the past 6 years, he's systematically moved $11 million out of your assets into offshore accounts under his siblings' names. $11 million. Natasha repeated numbly. That's what I can prove so far. I suspect there's more. Robert looked up, his expression grim. This wasn't a marriage, Miss Winters. It was a long-term theft operation. Phyllis Ashford pulled out a thick folder. My brother Marcus's father did the same thing to 3 women. I watched him charm them, marry them, isolate them, convince them they were crazy, or worthless, or both, then take everything and leave them broken. He's been teaching Marcus since he was a teenager. I have journals, letters, even some recordings from his second wife before she died. She died? Natasha asked quietly. Suspicious fall down the stairs, 2 weeks after she told me she was filing for divorce. Police ruled it an accident, but she'd started documenting his abuse, and she'd told me she was afraid. Phyllis's hands trembled slightly. I tried to investigate. That's when the family cut me off. Said I was crazy, vindictive, trying to destroy them. I've spent 30 years collecting evidence no one would listen to. I'm listening now, Natasha said. Simone Baptiste laid out the criminal strategy. Elder abuse is a slam dunk with the audio recordings. Fraud charges based on the fake company and the stolen assets. We can also pursue conspiracy charges for his siblings. They were active participants in the abuse. And if we can prove the pattern across his father's victims. She looked at Phyllis. We might be able to bring RICO charges, organized criminal activity. How long will this take? Natasha asked. To dismantle him completely? 6 months to a year for the criminal case. The civil case for asset recovery can run parallel. Margot leaned forward. But here's what we do first. Today. Right now. We file for emergency protective orders, freeze all joint assets, and lock him out of everything he thinks he owns. We also file a criminal complaint so there's an official investigation started. Then, we wait for him to panic. He'll panic hard, Phyllis said with grim satisfaction. These men are only confident when they're in control. The moment they realize they're not. She smiled. It's spectacular to watch. Natasha looked around the table at these women who'd shown up on Christmas morning to help her fight. Dr. Harrison, who'd dedicated her career to protecting vulnerable patients. Simone, who'd built her practice on defending the elderly. Margot, who'd been waiting 6 years to say, I told you so, but was too professional to gloat. Phyllis, who'd spent 3 decades collecting evidence that might finally matter. Thank you, Natasha said softly. All of you. Thank you for believing this matters. Women protecting women, Simone said simply. It's the only way these patterns ever get broken. By noon on Christmas, the first strikes had been made. Emergency protective orders filed. All joint bank accounts frozen pending investigation. Credit cards canceled. The penthouse locks changed by a locksmith who owed Margot a favor. A criminal complaint filed with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office documenting elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Marcus Ashford woke up on Christmas afternoon to discover he no longer had access to anything he thought he owned. Natasha had one final meeting that evening at the Four Seasons, with her mother resting comfortably in the next room. David Brennan, the lawyer who'd written her prenup, arrived looking nervous. He'd been Marcus's family friend, the man Natasha had trusted to protect her interests 6 years ago. I need you to understand something, Natasha said, her voice quiet and deadly. I have audio recordings of Marcus admitting you wrote that prenup to benefit him, not me. I have evidence that you violated attorney-client privilege and engaged in fraud. You have 2 choices. David's face went white. Natasha, Choice 1. You cooperate fully. You provide documentation of every conversation with Marcus about defrauding me. You testify about his intentions. You surrender your license voluntarily and agree to never practice law again. In exchange, we pursue civil penalties. Only you lose your career but not your freedom. She leaned forward. Choice 2. We prosecute you criminally alongside Marcus. Conspiracy to commit fraud, legal malpractice, theft. You'll be disbarred anyway, but you'll do it from a prison cell. So which is it, David? Do you want to be the cooperating witness or the co-defendant? David Brennan's hands shook. I'll cooperate. God, Natasha, I'm so sorry. He said it was just standard asset protection, that you understood. Save it for your deposition. She slid a document across the table. Sign this. It's your agreement to cooperate and your voluntary surrender of your law license. Margot Chen will be in touch about your testimony schedule. He signed with trembling hands. After he left, Natasha sat alone in the suite's living room, staring out at the city lights. 6 years of her life had been a lie. 6 years of love, passion, partnership, all of it had been Marcus playing a role, following his father's playbook, training her to be the perfect victim. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed that breaking her spirit would keep her broken. He'd forgotten that she'd built an empire before she met him, that she'd inherited her grandmother's spine along with her grandmother's estate, that the woman he'd spent 6 years trying to destroy was still there, underneath the pain, and she was done being anyone's victim. Her phone buzzed. A text from Margot. It's done. Everything's frozen. He tried to use his Amex an hour ago, declined. Tried to access the joint checking locked. He's going to lose his mind. Natasha allowed herself a small, cold smile. Good. Let him feel what it's like to have the ground disappear beneath his feet. Let him experience the terror of realizing everything he thought was secure is actually gone. She texted back, "What's next?" Margot's response came immediately. Now we wait for him to make a mistake. Angry men always do. Dawn broke cold and clear over Manhattan. Natasha stood in the lobby of her building with Margot Chen, a locksmith, and a police officer who was there to ensure things stayed civil. They'd filed all the proper paperwork. The penthouse was in Natasha's name, purchased with her inheritance before the marriage. Marcus had no legal right to be there, especially not with an active protective order. The locksmith made quick work of the door. Every lock changed, new keys cut. Natasha taped an envelope to the door. Inside was a formal eviction notice, a copy of the protective order, and a single handwritten note. The penthouse remembers who paid for it. You have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings under police supervision. Everything else stays. They left before Marcus woke up. 2 hours later, Natasha watched the security camera feed on her phone from the safety of the Four Seasons. Marcus appeared in the hallway around 10 a.m., clearly hungover from whatever he'd done after she left the party. He tried his key, frowned, tried again. Then he saw the note. The transformation was immediate. His face went from confusion to rage in seconds. He started pounding on the door, screaming, "Natasha, open this fucking door. This is my home." The pounding continued for 5 minutes before building security arrived. The video had no audio, but Natasha could see Marcus gesturing wildly, his face red with fury. Security showed him something, probably the legal paperwork, and his expression shifted from rage to disbelief. He pulled out his phone, clearly trying to call his lawyer, then his bank, then his credit cards. Natasha watched him slowly realize that every financial access point he had was frozen. His siblings arrived within the hour. Vivian in designer clothes, Julian carrying camera equipment like this was content for his social media. The three of them stood in the hallway. Marcus clearly ranting while his siblings tried to calm him down. Then Vivian pulled out her wallet, probably offering to pay for a hotel. Natasha watched her try 3 different cards at the building's business center. All declined. The offshore accounts where Marcus had been funneling Natasha's money, frozen as part of the fraud investigation. Every account linked to the Ashford family, under scrutiny. Marcus's face, when he realized his entire family was suddenly broke, was almost worth the 6 years of lies, almost. Natasha remembered their first night in this penthouse, after she'd purchased it 3 months before their wedding. Marcus had carried her over the threshold even though they weren't married yet, spinning her around in the empty living room. "This is going to be our empire," he'd said, kissing her deeply. "Everything we build together starts here. This home, our love, our future, all of it begins in this moment." He'd made love to her that night on the floor of the empty master bedroom, the city lights streaming through the windows. "I'm the luckiest man alive," he'd whispered against her skin. "I get to spend forever with you in this beautiful place you created." She'd believed every word. Believed he saw the penthouse as theirs, not his. Believed his love was real, not performance. Now, watching him rage outside the door of the home he'd never actually owned, Natasha felt nothing. The man she'd loved had never existed. This screaming, entitled criminal was who he'd always been. Her phone rang. "Margot. He's calling everyone he knows, trying to find a place to stay," Margot said, amusement in her voice. Apparently word travels fast in their social circle. Nobody wants to harbor someone under investigation for elder abuse and fraud. "Where will they go?" "My investigator says they're heading to Marcus's cousin's apartment in Brooklyn. 2-bedroom place, 3 adults. Should be cozy." Margot paused. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm watching a stranger destroy himself." "Good. Keep that distance. You're going to need it." That evening, Natasha returned to the penthouse for the first time since the Christmas party. The cleaning service she'd hired had been thorough. All evidence of the party was gone. The furniture returned to its proper places. Her sentimental Christmas ornaments carefully boxed and labeled. Her grandmother's piano was being delivered tomorrow from the storage unit where Marcus had sold it. She'd paid triple the auction price to get it back, and it was worth every penny. She walked through the space slowly, reclaiming it. This was her home, her sanctuary, her empire. Marcus had never belonged here, she'd just been too in love to see it. In the bedroom, she opened her laptop and checked her email. 3 messages made her pause. The first was from Marcus, sent an hour ago. "Natasha, please. I know you're angry, but we can fix this. Let me explain everything. I love you. I've always loved you. This is all a misunderstanding. Call me, please." The second was from his lawyer. "Miss Winters, my client is requesting mediation to resolve this matter quietly. A public trial would be painful for everyone involved. Perhaps we can discuss a settlement?" The third was from Vivian. "You vindictive bitch. You've destroyed our entire family over a misunderstanding. Marcus was trying to protect you by handling your mother while you worked, and this is how you repay him? We'll see you in court." Natasha deleted all 3 without responding. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Julian. I have footage from the party. Footage of you abandoning your mother for months. Footage that will make you look like the villain. Drop the charges or I release it. She forwarded the text to Margot with a note. Add witness tampering to the charges. Another text, this one from Marcus himself. Remember Santorini? Remember the promises we made? The life we planned? That was real, Natasha. What we had was real. Don't throw it away because of one misunderstanding. She thought about responding, then decided he deserved the truth. What we had was your performance. The only real thing was my love, and you weaponized it. Don't contact me again. She blocked his number. Over the next week, Natasha methodically dismantled the life Marcus had built on her foundation. She contacted every business associate he'd networked through her connections. She withdrew funding from projects he'd championed. She called in favors from board seats he'd gained through her influence. She wasn't being vindictive. She was simply removing her support and watching his house of cards collapse under its own weight. The calls from his family became increasingly desperate. His mother, the first wife his father had destroyed, left a sobbing voicemail about how her baby didn't deserve this. His sister sent threatening emails. His brother posted videos calling Natasha a gold-digging narcissist who trapped a good man. Margot had each instance documented for the protective order violations. On New Year's Eve, exactly 1 week after the Christmas discovery, Natasha received a report from her investigator. Marcus and his siblings had been at an expensive restaurant in Soho, ordering champagne and steaks. When the bill came, all their cards were declined. They'd tried to leave without paying. The restaurant had called the police. The video of them being escorted out while other diners filmed on their phones had already gone viral. Natasha poured herself a glass of wine, a Chateau Margaux from her personal collection, a bottle Marcus had once claimed he'd purchased, and toasted the camera feed, showing her empty, peaceful penthouse. Happy New Year, she said softly to no one. To new beginnings built on truth instead of lies. January brought cold clarity and methodical justice. Natasha worked with her team like a general commanding an army. Every aspect of Marcus's life was examined, documented, and dismantled. Every lie he'd told unraveled into evidence. Every person he'd manipulated became a potential witness. Robert Kim, the financial forensics specialist, was the first to deliver a major victory. I found another $6 million, he reported in early January, pulling up spreadsheets. He was better at hiding it than I expected, but criminals always make mistakes. This money went through shell corporations he set up in Julian's name, then offshore to the Caymans. The paper trail is clear, it's all your money, systematically stolen over 6 years. $17 million total, Natasha said quietly. $17 million. The Monaco villa had been $42 million. She'd thought she was saving them from bankruptcy. Instead, she just made it easier for him to rob her. There's more, Robert continued. Marcus has been telling investors he still runs Ashford Technologies. He's taken meetings, accepted consulting fees, even signed contracts, all while the company hasn't existed for 3 years. That's fraud on multiple levels. Who are the victims? 7 companies that paid him consulting fees, totaling $3 million for services he never provided. And 3 angel investors who gave him money for expansion projects that never happened, another $2 million. Robert looked up. He's not just a con artist domestically. This is interstate wire fraud. Federal charges. Simone Baptiste delivered the next blow. She'd been working with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, building the criminal case. They're moving forward with charges, she reported. Elder abuse in the first degree, that's a Class B felony. Criminal fraud, conspiracy. And because of the federal wire fraud element, the FBI is now involved. She smiled grimly. Marcus Ashford is about to become very familiar with the justice system. The FBI investigation uncovered something even more disturbing. Phyllis Ashford's documentation of Marcus's father wasn't just historical evidence, it was proof of a pattern that might still be active. Marcus's father, Richard Ashford, had a 4th wife nobody knew about. A woman in Florida who'd married him 2 years ago and was already showing signs of financial abuse. She's safe now, the FBI agent assigned to the case told Natasha during a meeting. We reached out, showed her the evidence, helped her file for divorce and protective orders. She's the one who agreed to testify about Richard's methods, which are identical to Marcus's. This is multi-generational organized crime. Natasha thought about that woman in Florida. Another victim of the Ashford men's predatory pattern. Another person whose trust had been weaponized. I want to help her, Natasha said. Whatever she needs for legal fees, safety, starting over, tell her she has support. The agent nodded. I'll let her know. She's grateful you stopped them. In late January, Natasha was at Whole Foods, buying ingredients for dinner with her mother when she saw him. Marcus was alone in the checkout line, his cart filled with ramen, frozen dinners, and cheap beer. He wore jeans and a hoodie, no designer suits, no expensive watches. He looked thin, exhausted, defeated. For a moment, their eyes met across the store. She saw him recognize her, saw the emotions flash across his face. Shame, rage, longing, calculation. He opened his mouth like he might say something. Then several people in the store moved between them, forming a protective barrier without saying a word. The community protecting one of their own from a known predator. Marcus stood there, alone with his cart of cheap food, watching the life he'd destroyed move on without him. Natasha checked out, accepted help from a store employee who recognized her and insisted on carrying her bags to her car, and drove back to the Four Seasons where she and Delphine were staying, while the penthouse was being completely renovated, erasing every trace of Marcus's presence. "Did you see him?" Delphine asked when Natasha returned, reading her daughter's face. "Yes." "How did you feel?" Natasha set down the groceries and sat beside her mother. "Nothing. I felt nothing at all. Like looking at a stranger." Delphine squeezed her hand. "Good. Means you're healing." That night, Natasha received a letter, hand-delivered by courier, marked urgent. Inside was a handwritten note from Marcus. "Natasha, I know you won't take my calls, so I'm writing this instead. Please, just read it. I miss you. I miss us. I miss coming home to you, laughing with you, building our life together. Do you remember our honeymoon? The sunrise in Santorini, making love on that balcony, promising forever? That was real. What we had was real. I made mistakes. I know that now. I was stressed about the company, about money, about disappointing you. I handled things badly. But that doesn't mean our entire relationship was a lie. I love you. I have always loved you. I'm in therapy now. I'm working on myself, understanding where I went wrong. Dr. Williams, do you remember him? He treated my mom after Dad left. He's helping me process my childhood trauma. He says I learned unhealthy patterns from my father, that I repeated abuse I didn't even recognize as abuse. But I can change. I am changing. For you. For us. I know what you think you heard in those recordings. But you're missing context. The stress I was under, the financial pressure, the fear of losing everything, it made me someone I'm not. The real me is the man who held you on our wedding night and promised to cherish you forever. That man still exists. That man still loves you desperately. Please, let me explain everything. Let me show you I can be the husband you deserve. Don't throw away 6 years of marriage because of 3 bad months. I'm staying at my cousin's place in Brooklyn. It's not much, but I'm trying to rebuild. I'm trying to be better. And I'm doing it because I still believe we can have our future back. All my love, Marcus, P.S. Your mother and I had our difficulties, but I never meant to hurt her. I think she misunderstood some situations because of her condition. I hope she's recovering well. Please tell her I'm sorry for any pain I caused. Natasha read the letter twice, then called Dr. Sarah Williams, a therapist Simone had recommended who specialized in abuse recovery. "Read it to me," Dr. Williams said. Natasha did. "Classic Darvo, doctor," Williams said immediately. "Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. He's denying his intentional abuse, attacking your perception of reality, and positioning himself as the victim. The therapy claim is particularly manipulative. He's trying to show change without actually changing anything. The part about my mother's condition, making her misunderstand. Gaslighting. He's suggesting her disability makes her an unreliable witness, which invalidates her trauma and makes you doubt your own perceptions. Doctor," Williams paused. "How do you feel reading this?" "Angry. Because part of me, a small part, wants to believe him. Wants to believe the man I loved was real. That's natural. You loved who you thought he was. Grieving that person is healthy. But Natasha, listen carefully. The man in that letter is the same man from the recordings. This is his abuse. The love bombing, the nostalgia manipulation, the blame shifting, this is how predators keep their victims trapped." After the call, Natasha wrote one response. "Marcus, I heard you perfectly clearly in the recordings. You said you spent 6 years training me to believe I'm worthless. You said you learned from watching your father destroy 3 women. You said the bankruptcy was fake, the company was closed, and everything was strategic theft. Those words were yours. That truth was yours. And no amount of therapy, claims, or romantic reminiscence will erase what you actually said when you thought no one was listening. Don't contact me again. Violating the protective order will result in additional criminal charges. Natasha." She sent it through her attorney, then blocked every possible avenue of communication. 2 days later, Marcus violated the protective order anyway. He showed up drunk outside the Four Seasons at midnight, screaming her name. Security called the police. Natasha watched from her suite window as he was arrested, still screaming about how she'd ruined his life, how she owed him everything, how she'd regret destroying a good man. Good man, Delphine said from her wheelchair beside Natasha. Good men. Don't leave. Disabled women. On freezing balconies. No, Mom, they don't. The arrest made the news. Billionaire accused of elder abuse arrested for restraining order violation. The media was starting to pay attention to the case, particularly after Julian's social media videos about my psycho sister-in-law backfired when viewers discovered he'd been filming Delphine's abuse for entertainment. The court of public opinion was turning against the Ashfords, and the actual court was about to do the same. It was late February when Marcus appeared outside the penthouse for the final time. Natasha had moved back in the week before, after months of renovation that had transformed the space from their shared prison into her personal sanctuary. She was having tea on the balcony, the same balcony where her mother had nearly died when she heard him screaming from the street below. Natasha, I know you're up there. I just want to talk. She looked down. Marcus was alone, clearly drunk, looking up at her building with wild eyes. Pedestrians were giving him wide berth, several filming on their phones. Security was already moving toward him, but Natasha made a decision. She pulled out her phone and called down to the doorman. Let him up, but have police standing by. 5 minutes later, Marcus stumbled off the elevator. She met him at her door, freshly locked with new keys he'd never touched, and didn't invite him in. He looked terrible. Thin, unshaven, wearing clothes that didn't fit right. His expensive life had been stripped away, leaving only the entitled, angry man underneath. I just wanted to apologize, he said, his words slurring. Why won't you let me apologize? Because you're not sorry for what you did, Natasha said calmly. You're sorry you got caught. That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you. He tried to step closer. She held up a hand. You love my money. You loved the life I provided. You loved having someone trained to believe she was worthless without you. Her voice was steady, emotionless. But you never loved me. You don't even know who I am. I know you're cruel. He spat, his mask slipping. I know you're vindictive. I made mistakes, yes, but this? Destroying my entire life? Taking everything? That's not justice, that's revenge. No, Marcus. Justice is what's coming when you stand in front of a judge and explain why you left my disabled mother on a freezing balcony while you partied. Justice is when you explain the $17 million you stole. Justice is when you explain the fake company and the fraudulent contracts. She leaned against the doorframe, completely calm. Revenge would be if I'd done to you what you did to me. If I'd spent 6 years making you love me just to destroy you. If I'd isolated you from everyone who cared about you. If I'd systematically stolen everything you'd ever worked for, while gaslighting you into thinking you were the problem. Marcus's face contorted with rage. I gave you everything. I made you someone. Before me, you were just some commercial real estate nobody. I gave you social status, connections, a life. You gave me nothing I didn't already have. I bought social status with the money you stole. I created connections through my work. And the life we had? I paid for every single piece of it while you told me I was lucky you stayed. That's not how it was. That's exactly how it was. I have recordings of you explaining your strategy to your father. I have financial forensics proving systematic theft. I have medical evidence of the abuse you inflicted on my mother. I have testimony from your own family about the generational pattern of predation. She straightened, looking him directly in the eyes. You trained me to believe I was worthless. But here's what you didn't understand. I was never worthless. I was always powerful. I just had to remember that power wasn't a gift you gave me. It was something I'd had all along that you tried to steal. Fuck you, Marcus snarled. You think you've won? You think destroying me makes you the hero? You're just a bitter woman who couldn't forgive one mistake. $17 million in 3 months of torturing my disabled mother wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Multiple choices. Dozens of deliberate choices to cause harm for your benefit. She's fine. She's dramatic. Playing victim because she's mad I didn't worship her like you do. Behind Marcus, the elevator opened. 2 police officers stepped out. Time to go, Mr. Ashford, one of them said. Marcus spun around, suddenly realizing he'd walked into another violation. What? No, I came to apologize. That's not illegal. Protective order says no contact. This is contact. The officer was already pulling out handcuffs. You're under arrest for violating a court order? Again? As they cuffed him, Marcus looked back at Natasha with pure hatred. This isn't over. You're going to regret this. When I get out, when this is all done, you'll be in federal prison, Natasha interrupted calmly. For 6 to 8 years, according to my attorneys. And when you get out, you'll be a registered felon with no money, no reputation, and no power. While I'll be exactly what I always was, successful, independent, and surrounded by people who actually love me. She watched the realization hit him that he'd lost completely, that his victim had become his conqueror, that the woman he'd spent 6 years destroying was still standing while he crumbled. You were supposed to be broken, he whispered, almost to himself. I was broken, Natasha said softly. But broken isn't the same as destroyed. You taught me to be ruthless, Marcus. You taught me to fight without mercy. You taught me that love is a weapon and trust is a tool. She smiled, cold and final. Thank you for the education. Now get out of my building. The police led him away, still screaming about unfairness, about her cruelty, about his rights. His voice echoed in the hallway until the elevator doors closed. Natasha went back inside her penthouse, locked the door, and found her mother in the living room, calmly knitting. Is he gone? Delphine asked. He's gone. They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking tea, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Two women who'd survived a predator and come out stronger. That night, Natasha had dinner with someone new. Alessandro Moretti, an architect from Milan she'd met at an art gallery opening 3 weeks ago. He'd approached her not knowing who she was, interested only in her opinion of a sculpture they'd both been admiring. They'd talked for an hour about art, about beauty, about creation rather than destruction. He'd asked for her number without asking about her net worth. Had invited her to dinner without asking to come home with her afterward. Their first date had been at a small Italian restaurant in the village, nothing fancy. He'd asked about her mother, about her work, about what made her happy. And when she'd explained she was in the middle of a difficult divorce, he'd simply said, "Then I'll wait until you're ready, whenever that is." Tonight, their fourth date, they cooked together in her newly renovated kitchen. Alessandro made fresh pasta while she prepared the sauce, and they moved around each other with easy comfort. "You seem lighter tonight," he said, tasting the sauce and adding more basil. "Something happened?" "Final confrontation with my ex-husband. He's been arrested again. The trial starts in 3 weeks." Alessandro set down his spoon and turned to face her. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm free." He studied her face, then smiled. "Good. You deserve to be free." After dinner, they stood on the terrace, not the balcony where her mother had suffered, but the rooftop area she'd had completely redesigned. The city stretched out before them, lights glittering like scattered stars. Alessandro stood behind her, his arms wrapped loosely around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Not possessive, not controlling, just present. "This view is incredible," he said softly. "It is," she agreed. But she wasn't looking at the city. She was feeling the difference between Marcus's embrace, which had always felt like a cage, and Alessandro's, which felt like safety. "Tell me about Milan," she said. "Tell me about the buildings you design." And he did, his voice low and warm against her ear, talking about creating spaces where people feel at home, about architecture as shelter rather than status, about building things that last because they're loved, not just expensive. This, Natasha thought, is what it feels like when someone loves you without needing to own you. "I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever experienced real love after surviving fake love? Have you learned the difference between someone who supports you and someone who controls you? Share your experience in the comments below. Now let's see Marcus finally face justice for everything he's done." The courthouse in Lower Manhattan was packed. News crews lined the steps, reporters shouting questions at everyone entering. The case had become national news. Billionaire con artist faces justice for elder abuse and fraud. Natasha arrived with her team: Margot Chen, Simone Baptiste, Robert Kim, and Dr. Harrison. Behind them, in a wheelchair pushed by a professional caregiver, came Delphine. She'd insisted on being there, despite Natasha's concerns about the stress. "I survived 3 months of hell," Delphine had said. "I can survive 1 day of justice." Inside, Judge Patricia Morrison presided, a woman in her mid-60s with 3 decades of experience and a reputation for being simultaneously fair and ruthless. She'd seen every kind of case, every kind of criminal. She would not be charmed or manipulated. Marcus sat at the defense table with his lawyer, looking almost presentable in a borrowed suit. His family sat behind him, his mother crying performatively, his siblings glaring at Natasha, his father notably absent. The charges were read: elder abuse in the first degree, fraud in the first degree, criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, interstate fraud, theft, attempted grand larceny. A list so long it took 5 minutes to recite. Marcus pled not guilty to everything. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Natasha sat through every day of testimony, watching the evidence mount. Medical experts testified about Delphine's injuries, the bed sores that indicated prolonged neglect, the malnutrition, the dehydration so severe it could have killed her. Financial experts testified about the $17 million systematically stolen over 6 years, showing the paper trail that led directly to Marcus and his siblings. FBI agents testified about the pattern of behavior spanning 2 generations, with Richard Ashford's 4th wife describing abuse identical to what Delphine experienced. Former business associates testified about Marcus's fake consulting contracts, the money paid for services never rendered, the lies about Ashford Technologies still operating. David Brennan, the corrupt lawyer, testified about Marcus's explicit instructions to write a prenup that would leave Natasha with nothing. And then the recordings were played. The courtroom fell silent as Marcus's voice filled the space, drunk and unguarded, explaining his strategy to his father. The jury listened to him describe training Natasha to believe she was worthless. They heard him admit the bankruptcy was fake. They heard him discuss putting Delphine in a state facility where she'd be someone else's problem. They heard Julian's voice mocking Delphine's stroke-affected speech. They heard Vivienne discussing accidents that could solve their problem. They heard Marcus laughing while Delphine cried for help in the background. When the recordings finished, several jury members were crying. One man looked physically ill. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue stress, mental health issues, misunderstandings. But how do you misunderstand a man explicitly describing his plan to defraud his wife? Phyllis Ashford testified about the generational pattern, bringing 3 decades of documentation. I watched my brother destroy 3 women the same way, she said, her voice clear and strong. I watched him teach his son to do the same. This family has been running this con for 40 years. It ends today. On the final day of testimony, Delphine took the stand. She moved slowly, with obvious difficulty, but she was determined. The courtroom was completely silent as she was sworn in. Simone Baptiste handled the questioning gently. Mrs. Winters, can you describe your condition? I had a stroke 18 months ago. Left side, partial paralysis. Speech, affected. But, she smiled slightly. Mind, perfectly clear. Can you tell the court what happened while your daughter was in Monaco? Delphine spoke slowly, pausing when the words wouldn't come easily, but telling the truth with devastating clarity. She described being left in soiled clothes for days, being given spoiled food, being locked in her room during parties, being mocked and filmed for entertainment. Did Marcus Ashford ever physically harm you? Simone asked. No. Just everything else. What do you mean? Delphine looked directly at Marcus for the first time. He destroyed my dignity, my hope, my belief that people are good. He taught me what cruelty looks like when it smiles. Marcus wouldn't meet her eyes. What would you like to say to the jury? Simone asked. Delphine turned to face them. I am someone's mother, someone's friend. I worked 30 years as a nurse. I raised my daughter alone. I had a full life. Then I got sick and became vulnerable. She paused, gathering strength. Vulnerable people need protection, not predators. What he did to me, he will do to others, unless you stop him. Please, stop him. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood with obvious conviction. On the charge of elder abuse in the 1st degree, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus's face went white. On the charge of fraud in the 1st degree, we find the defendant guilty. His mother started sobbing. On all charges of wire fraud, interstate fraud, conspiracy, and theft, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus slumped in his chair. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but there was nothing left to save. Judge Morrison called for sentencing statements before issuing her ruling. Marcus stood, his lawyer having clearly coached him one final time. Your Honor, I want to apologize to everyone I've hurt. I was under tremendous stress and made terrible mistakes. I've been in therapy, working on myself, and I'm committed to making amends. I ask the court for mercy so I can become the man I should have been. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. Is that all? I love my wife. I never meant to hurt anyone. I hope someday she can forgive me. Judge Morrison looked at him for a long moment, then shuffled her papers. Mr. Ashford, in 30 years on the bench, I've heard every variation of I didn't mean it that exists. What makes your statement particularly offensive is that we have audio recordings of you explicitly describing your intentions. You absolutely meant it. Every bit of it. She leaned forward. The court has reviewed extensive evidence showing a pattern of predatory behavior spanning decades and crossing state lines. You didn't make mistakes under stress. You executed a carefully planned criminal enterprise, targeting vulnerable people who trusted you. Marcus started to speak. She held up a hand. I'm not finished. What disturbs me most about this case isn't just the financial fraud, though $17 million is certainly significant. It's the calculated cruelty. You left a disabled woman on a freezing balcony on Christmas morning while you partied with her money. You mocked her suffering for entertainment. You systematically destroyed her dignity while her daughter, your wife, worked to save you from a crisis you invented. She looked at the papers before her. The prosecution has recommended 8 years federal prison. The defense has asked for probation and community service. I've considered both recommendations and found them inadequate. Hope flickered briefly on Marcus's face. Inadequate because they don't account for the full scope of your crimes or the need to protect future victims from your family's pattern of predation. Therefore, Mr. Dong Ashford, I'm sentencing you as follows. She read from her document, her voice clear and final. On the charge of elder abuse in the first degree, 6 years in federal prison. On the charges of fraud and wire fraud, an additional 2 years to be served consecutively, not concurrently. Total sentence, 8 years federal prison with no possibility of parole before serving at least 6 years. Marcus made a choking sound. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution of $17 million to Natasha Winters, plus $5 million in punitive damages for emotional distress and the cost of her mother's ongoing medical care. All assets currently frozen will be liquidated to satisfy this judgment. Your Honor, that's everything, Marcus's lawyer started. Yes, it is, that's the point. Judge Morrison continued without pausing. You are also subject to a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with Natasha Winters or Delphine Winters, directly or through third parties, for the remainder of your life. Violation will result in additional criminal charges. She looked directly at Marcus. Furthermore, upon your release, you will be required to register as part of a federal database tracking financial predators. Yes, such a database exists for cases exactly like yours. Any future romantic or business partner you have will be notified of your conviction and pattern of behavior. Marcus's face had gone from white to gray. He looked like he might vomit. As for your siblings, Judge Morrison turned to where Vivienne and Julian sat, both looking terrified. The court notes that separate charges are pending against you for conspiracy and participation in elder abuse. I strongly suggest you cooperate fully with prosecutors. I will not be as lenient with co-conspirators who had every opportunity to stop these crimes and chose instead to participate. She turned back to Marcus. Mr. Ashford, you said you hope your wife will someday forgive you. Let me be clear. Forgiveness is not something you're owed, and it's certainly not something this court cares about. What this court cares about is justice for your victims and protection for future potential victims. She picked up her gavel. You spent 6 years teaching a woman to believe she was worthless. You failed. She's sitting in this courtroom today, successful and strong, while you're going to prison. I'd say she learned a different lesson than the one you intended to teach. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. 8 years federal prison. Bailiff, remand the defendant into custody immediately. As the bailiff moved forward with handcuffs, Marcus finally looked at Natasha, really looked at her, and she saw the moment he understood, truly understood, that he'd lost everything. His freedom, his money, his reputation, his power. All of it gone because he'd underestimated the woman he tried to destroy. This isn't fair, he said, his voice breaking. I'm not a monster. I'm not. You left a disabled woman on a freezing balcony on Christmas morning, Judge Morrison interrupted. While you laughed and drank champagne purchased with stolen money, what would you call that, Mr. Ashford? He had no answer. As they led him away, his mother's wailing filled the courtroom. His siblings sat frozen, realizing their own trials were coming. His lawyer started making calls about appeals that would never succeed. And Natasha sat perfectly still, feeling something she hadn't felt in 6 years, safe. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Natasha had prepared a statement, but Simone Baptiste spoke first. Today, justice was served for Delphine Winters and all victims of financial abuse and elder exploitation. The Ashford family's decades-long pattern of predatory behavior has finally been stopped. We hope this case sends a clear message. No amount of wealth or charm will protect predators from consequences. Then Natasha stepped forward, Delphine beside her in her wheelchair, the two of them facing the cameras together. I want to say something about forgiveness, Natasha began, her voice steady. Many people have asked me if I'll forgive Marcus, if I'll find peace through forgiveness. And here's my answer. Forgiveness is a personal choice, not an obligation. What I needed wasn't to forgive him, it was to release my anger and move forward. She looked directly into the cameras. Marcus taught me many things during our relationship. He taught me to recognize manipulation. He taught me that love without respect is just control. He taught me that my instincts were right when I ignored them. But those lessons came from his actions, not his intentions. He wanted to break me. Instead, he showed me exactly how strong I am. Delphine reached up and took her daughter's hand. My mother survived 3 months of abuse because she documented everything, because she held on to hope, and because she's tougher than any man who underestimates vulnerable people. She's my hero. And together, we're building something Marcus never understood. A life based on truth instead of lies. A reporter shouted a question. Do you feel vindicated? Natasha considered. I feel relieved. Vindication would mean I needed his downfall to prove my worth. I don't. I'm successful, loved, and surrounded by genuine people. Whether Marcus is in prison or not doesn't change who I am. It just protects other women from becoming his next victims. What's next for you? Healing, growing, using my platform and resources to support other survivors, and living a life that's genuinely mine. She smiled, the first real smile she'd shown publicly in months. The best revenge isn't making someone fall, it's your own rising. And I'm done falling. They left the courthouse together, Natasha pushing her mother's wheelchair through the crowd of supporters who'd gathered other survivors of financial abuse, advocates for elder protection, people who'd followed the case and wanted to show their support. As they reached the car, Delphine looked up at her daughter. I'm proud of you. So, very proud. We did this together, Mom. You documented everything. You survived. You fought. No, Delphine said firmly, her speech clearer than it had been in months' emotion giving her strength. You saved us both. You remembered who you were. Before him, Natasha knelt beside the wheelchair, taking her mother's hands. He tried to take everything. Our money, our dignity, our belief in love. But you know what he couldn't take? What? Us. Our bond. The fact that we're family, and family means we fight for each other. Natasha's voice caught. I'm sorry I left you with him. I'm sorry I trusted him over my instincts. You loved him. That's not wrong. What he did was wrong. You don't apologize for having a good heart. They held each other for a long moment, two women who'd walked through fire and come out forged in steel. The rooftop garden of the Tribeca penthouse had become Natasha's favorite space. She'd transformed it completely. Lush plants, comfortable seating, soft lights that made everything glow warmly as the sun set over Manhattan. Tonight, the space was filled with people who mattered. Real friends, not social climbers. Colleagues who respected her work, not her wealth. Survivors she'd supported through her foundation. People who knew her story and celebrated her survival. Delphine sat in her wheelchair near the garden center, surrounded by the women from her stroke recovery support group. Her speech had improved dramatically over 3 years, and she'd become an advocate for elder abuse prevention. Her memoir, 3 months on a balcony, a survivor's story of elder abuse, was required reading in medical schools across the country and had sparked legislative changes in elder care laws. You're telling the story wrong, Patricia, Delphine was saying, laughing. I didn't threaten the senator. I just explained very clearly what would happen if the bill didn't pass. The women around her laughed. Delphine had testified before Congress twice now, her powerful story changing hearts and laws. 3 states had passed stricter elder abuse legislation directly because of her advocacy. Natasha stood near the edge of the rooftop, watching her mother thrive, feeling the warmth of genuine community around her. You look happy, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Alessandro, holding 2 glasses of wine, his eyes warm with affection. 3 years together now, and he still made her heart beat faster but in a different way than Marcus had. Not with anxiety disguised as excitement, but with genuine joy. I am happy, she said, accepting the wine. Actually, genuinely happy. They'd taken their relationship slowly. Alessandro had returned to Milan after their first few dates, and they'd maintained a long-distance relationship for 6 months while Natasha healed and dealt with the trial. He'd never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel guilty for needing time. When he'd finally asked her to visit him in Milan, she'd gone with her mother. He'd spent the week showing them both the city, treating Delphine with the same respect and attention he showed Natasha. He'd modified his apartment to be wheelchair accessible before they arrived. He'd researched the best accessible restaurants. He'd treated Delphine like family from the beginning. Because she is your family, he'd said simply when Natasha thanked him. That means she's important to me too. A year into their relationship, he'd moved to New York. Not into her penthouse, they both agreed she needed to keep that space as wholly hers, but into an apartment 3 blocks away. Close enough to build a life together, separate enough to maintain independence. He'd proposed 6 months ago, on this very rooftop, with Delphine's blessing secured beforehand. The ring was simple, elegant, nothing like the massive diamond Marcus had used to mark his territory. This was a choice, not a claim. 1 year, Alessandro said now, slipping his arm around her waist. 1 year until you become Mrs. Moretti, or Miss Winters Moretti, or whatever name makes you happy. I'm keeping Winters professionally, Natasha said, leaning into him. It's who I built my empire as. But personally, she smiled. I like the sound of Natasha Moretti. I like the sound of you happy, he replied, kissing her temple. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, a news alert. Marcus Ashford denied parole. Will serve full 8-year sentence. She deleted the notification without emotion. Marcus was a ghost now, a cautionary tale, a chapter that was closed. She'd heard through lawyers that he'd tried to contact her multiple times, from prison letters she'd never read, calls she'd never accepted. The permanent restraining order meant even his attempts were documented as violations. His siblings had taken plea deals. Vivian served 2 years for conspiracy. Julian got 18 months. Both were permanently estranged from Natasha's life. Richard Ashford, the father who'd started it all, was facing his own charges in Florida. The pattern had finally been broken. You okay? Alessandro asked, noticing her expression. I'm perfect. Just deleting old news. Across the rooftop, Dr. Harrison called for attention. The hospital foundation Natasha sat on had just announced a new wing dedicated to elder care and abuse prevention, funded largely by Natasha's foundation and named in Delphine's honor. To Delphine Winters, Dr. Harrison said, raising her glass. Who survived, who fought back, and who's saving countless others by sharing her story. Everyone raised their glasses. To Delphine, Natasha's venture capital fund had grown to a $200 million portfolio, investing exclusively in women-led startups. She'd been named to Forbes 40 Under 40 and Fortune's Most Powerful Women in Business. Her commercial real estate firm had tripled in size. But none of those accolades mattered as much as this moment standing in her home, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was, watching her mother laugh with genuine joy, feeling Alessandro's arms around her with no hidden agenda. Tell me something, Alessandro said softly. Do you ever think about him? Sometimes, Natasha admitted, but not the way you might think. I don't miss him. How can you miss someone who never existed? I think about the lessons, about how easy it is to lose yourself in someone else's story, about the difference between love and control. She turned in his arms to face him. Marcus taught me what love isn't. You're teaching me what love is. Real love doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't require you to doubt yourself. It doesn't use your vulnerabilities as weapons. Real love, Alessandro said, touching her face gently, celebrates who you are and wants you to become even more yourself. Exactly. They kissed softly, the city lights twinkling around them, the sound of genuine laughter and community filling the air. Later that evening, after the guests had left and Alessandro had gone home to his apartment, Natasha sat with her mother in the quiet penthouse. You did it, Delphine said, sipping herbal tea. You rebuilt everything better than before. We did it, Natasha corrected. You documented everything, survived everything, and helped me remember who I was. And who are you? Natasha thought about the question. Someone who trusts herself now. Someone who knows the difference between being loved and being owned. Someone who won't ever let anyone make her feel worthless again. Good, Delphine smiled. That's exactly who I raised. They sat in comfortable silence, the view of Manhattan stretching before them. Somewhere in a federal prison, Marcus was probably still convinced he was the victim, still believing he'd been wronged. His narcissism would never let him see the truth. But that wasn't Natasha's problem anymore. She'd learned the most important lesson. The greatest revenge isn't watching someone fall. It's building a life so full of genuine love and success that you forget to care whether they fell or not. Mom, Natasha said softly, thank you for refusing to stay broken. Thank you, Delphine replied, for showing me that being vulnerable doesn't mean being weak. We both became whole by refusing to stay broken. Natasha looked out at the city, the empire she'd built, the life she'd reclaimed, the future she was choosing on her own terms. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 years ago, so in love she'd ignored every warning sign. She thought about the woman she'd become through fire and survival. And she realized something profound. Marcus hadn't destroyed her. He'd revealed her. Revealed the strength she'd always had but never needed to use. Revealed the resilience that came from loving herself as much as she'd loved him. Revealed the power that comes from choosing truth over comfort. The penthouse, once a prison, then a battleground, now a sanctuary, stood as proof that spaces can be reclaimed, that what's stolen can be recovered, that what's broken can be rebuilt better than before. As Natasha prepared for bed that night, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who'd returned from Monaco on that Christmas morning 3 years ago. This woman had laugh lines instead of worry lines, had clear eyes instead of confused ones, had the confident posture of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she deserved. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Alessandro. Dreaming of our wedding. Dreaming of building a life with you. Dreaming of growing old on that rooftop, watching the city lights and counting our blessings. Sleep well, amore mio. She smiled, responding, already living those dreams. See you tomorrow. Before she turned off her phone, she opened her notes app and wrote something she'd been thinking about all evening. Note to self, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. I spent years loving Marcus, months hating him, but the real victory came when I stopped feeling anything at all, when he became just a story I survived, not the story that defined me. The best revenge isn't causing someone's downfall. It's building a life so beautiful, so authentic, so full of genuine love that their absence becomes irrelevant. It's becoming so wholly yourself that the person who tried to destroy you becomes just a footnote in your much larger story. Marcus wanted to be my forever. Instead, he became my lesson. And the woman who emerged from that lesson, she's someone he never could have imagined because he never actually knew me at all. She saved the note, turned off the light, and went to sleep in her reclaimed sanctuary, dreaming not of the past but of the future she was actively creating. The greatest revenge, she'd learned, wasn't watching Marcus fall from grace. It was her rising into grace, becoming more compassionate because of his cruelty, more discerning because of his deception, more authentic because of his performance. It was building a life so genuine that his fake love became nothing more than a distant, forgettable dream. And in the morning, when she woke to sunlight streaming through windows that were wholly hers, when she made coffee in a kitchen he'd never contaminated, when she kissed her mother's forehead and texted her fiancé, good morning, when she went to work at a company she'd built with her own hands, she would do it all without thinking about Marcus Ashford even once. Because that's what real victory looks like. Not destruction, but liberation. Not revenge, but rising. Not his falling, but her flying. Thank you for being here with me today on Mr. Carl Stories. If this story touched you, if you've experienced betrayal and survived it, if you're learning to rise after someone tried to keep you down, I see you. Your story matters. Your survival matters. Your rising matters. Drop a comment below sharing your own story of survival and strength. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these stories of resilience and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than the people who tried to break them. Remember, the greatest revenge isn't watching someone else fall. It's your own rising. It's becoming so fully, authentically yourself that the people who tried to dim your light become irrelevant to your brightness. Until next time, keep rising, keep fighting, keep remembering that being broken isn't the same as being destroyed, and the strongest steel is always forged in the hottest fire. This is Mr. Cael Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.